Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to my video today. If you do like this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell button so that you get notified when there's new videos posted. Today we're going to talk about some repairs on the Evo 456. Specifically, we're going to talk about the ball joints on the front end of the cars. Now, the Evo 6 one is very easy to replace. It's a bolt-on unit. You can separate it really easily. You can change it out. The ones we're going to focus on today are the 4s and 5s, which if you look through the Mitsubishi parts catalogs, a lot of times Mitsubishi doesn't list that ball joint as a separate part number because they want you to buy the whole arm. Now, I think some people on the internet have decided that that means that that ball joint can't ever be replaced. Well, that's incorrect. It can be replaced. So we're going to go through some procedures today to replace that ball joint, and if you do want to take it on, great. It's actually not all that bad, but you do need a few specialized tools, one being a press, a 20-ton press. So let's take a look at how you do this.
So what we're starting with here is the Evo 4 ball joint. This has been pressed out already. Now the Evo 4 ball joint and the arm are a little bit more durable as the arm is made out of steel. You can see that the bottom would have a grease nipple on it. Now on the steel arm, keep in mind that you have to remove the C-clip from the top. This is very important as you're going to damage the arm or your press if you leave that clip on and try and push the ball joint through the arm. This is going to be the part number for the Evo 4 ball joint. So pause the video and take note of that. And here's a comparison with the new ball joint and the old Mitsubishi ball joint. Keep in mind the old ball joint does not have the rubber cover on it. So now after getting that ball joint bottomed out in the steel arm, the next step is going to be to flip it over and get your snap ring pliers and make sure that that snap ring is seated. There will be a relief at the very close to where the ball joint meets the bore of the steel arm, and so if it is pushed all the way in, you should have no problem getting that C-clip seated. Now, after that, you flip the arm over, and there's a provision for a grease nipple. Now, if you did take the grease nipple out, if you unscrewed it to put it in the press, then you replace that and use a grease gun and make sure that there's enough grease available in the boot to keep that ball joint healthy. Now, after you've completed that, it's ready for reassembly.
Okay, so let's take a look at the A-arm and we'll take a look at the ball joint. So now, here we have a arm out of an Evo 5. Now, this is going to be kind of what you're going to end up with. When a ball joint wears out
a lot of time it's because the boot splits. And what that causes is debris to get in and into that joint, and it causes the joint to wear, and then eventually you have play in that area. So now this is going to be fairly true to life. So what we're going to do first to repair something like this is we're going to clean this up so that we can actually see what we're dealing with. So that's step one. Let's get this thing cleaned. Okay, so now first thing we're going to do after we just clean up a little bit is along the bottom edge of this boot, there's going to be a relief. So that's the first thing you got to do, is you got to find that relief. Now that's the spot where you're going to pry on the boot, because that boot has to come off. So let's take a look. And over on this side, there's actually a small gap. So there we go. Okay, so now what that'll do is that'll get rid of this boot. Okay, so now what that's going to reveal here is there is a C-clip right here. You can see it. Or on this side here. Right there, look, there's a gap there. Now that C-clip is what's retaining this ball joint that's pressed in. So now it's going to be pressed in this way. Okay, that C-clip's put on so that it doesn't back out going that way. Okay, so now the idea will be that you have to get that off. So that's step two, is getting rid of that. Okay, so this is how it looks like when it's off. That's the ring. Now, for myself, there is a tool for this, but for myself, I just use needle nose pliers. Just make sure you're wearing some eye protection, because this thing does have a lot of spring in it, so it can go airborne and smack you in the face if you're not careful. So just be cautious about that, but you don't need a special tool to get this off, but there exists a special tool, so just keep that in mind. So now, what has to happen is this ball joint has to be pressed out in this direction. Now, you could beat it out with a hammer, but you got to be very careful. This is an aluminum arm. So what you'll probably need is a press. Okay, here we have our 2010 press. Have a 7/8 impact socket on top of the ball joint. Let's see what we can do here. All right, here we have it. Okay, so now because of the dissimilar metals, the ball joint has got some steel in it. The lower arm is aluminum in some cases it'll be steel. The aluminum one, you just got to be a little bit delicate with it. There's a small lip on the outside where the steel and aluminum don't play nice together, especially when they get wet and oxidize. So
what might happen, and it did happen to me, is that the small edge along the bore will crack off. Now this doesn't wreck the arm, it's actually just a very small edge. So you can take a Dremel tool or something like that and clean that up. Certainly doesn't ruin the arm. And you see on the inside what I'm talking about here. But the bore itself is fine. And just inspect it for any damage. And then life goes on. Now, if this makes you uncomfortable, I don't suggest you drive on any broken parts. Quite the opposite. You do what's your comfort zone. Myself, I wouldn't have any issue with this. I'd inspect the bore for cracks, inspect the arm for cracks, put the new ball joint in, press the new ball joint in, and continue on my day. However, it does at times damage that small retention lip. And I'm certainly not telling you to drive on something that's not safe, so you make that choice. But for myself, it doesn't bother me. Now, these are the ball joints. Now you can see on the lip on the inside that there's a ridge, and the ridge coincides with the ridge right here on the ball joint. So on one side it's retained by that ridge, on the other side it's retained by that snap ring that goes in the channel. And that's basically how the new one is retained as well, and we'll take a look at that next. Okay, so let's open up the Fabest ball joint package, see what we're dealing with here. Okay, so comes in a plastic bag. Open it up. Got the ball joint here. Okay, so we have one ball joint. Okay, the boot's there. Don't have a grease nipple, but we should assume that it probably doesn't have grease in it. That's the assumption you probably should make. So make sure you do have some grease handy or a grease gun where you can inject it into the boot there. The other thing that it comes with is the snap ring. Okay, so this is what we'll be using to retain it. Even after it's pressed in, you want to retain it with the snap ring. And yeah, so you'll need a set of snap ring pliers as well for this. Okay, so I removed the boot so that you can kind of see a little bit better how these guys work. So the boot's retained by a couple of wires. If you just ease them off gently, you won't bend them and not be able to use them again. There's a top and bottom one for the boot. Okay, if you look in the ball joint itself, it has a very small amount of grease. I would put a little bit more in when you put the boot back on. Now, if you look at the ball joint itself, so this part right here at the top is to retain the boot. Directly below it is where the snap ring would go. Okay, so the snap ring goes over top. You're gonna have to use pliers to manipulate it over into that ridge, that bottom ridge. And this would be after this is pressed into the arm from the bottom. Okay, so let's get on that. Okay, so here we have the press setup. Ball joint's gonna sit in here. You need to support the edges of the
arm because again, it's aluminum, so you just got to be careful with that. And because of the way that the ball joint is on the back, there's this little bump. I'm going to try and distribute the load just by throwing a piece of metal in between the press and this, just so it doesn't push into this this part. Try and distribute the load on the back of the joint if you can. So the idea is it's going to sit like this. Okay. Okay, so we have the piece of metal. It's probably a 1/4-inch plate steel ball joint in there. Okay, we just have to keep our fingers away from everything and just be a little cautious with this since it is 20 tons. Okay, so packed a bit of grease in here, put on the snap ring, right flush with that, right flush with the arm. So this is the side, if you recall, there was a lip there that's been ground off. The joint is pressed in flat. So this should be 100%. Like I said earlier in the video, if you're not confident with these aluminum arms, they are a bit soft. Just be cautious with how you handle them, and if you do get any sort of cracks, then really it's over. Just toss it. It ends up being a safety thing, so you do have to be a bit gentle with these things. So yeah. Alright guys, thanks for checking out the video today. So that was the Evo 4 and 5 ball joint, front ball joint install video how-to. Now with that 5 one, just like I've said several times during the video, that one's at your own risk. Those are aluminum arms. You have to be very careful not to crack them, not to damage them. That little lip on the underside, that is going to break off because of the issue with dissimilar metals and corrosion. Like I said before, I just file it flat, check for cracks on the bore, and if everything's fine, then you can press in some new ones, but be careful with that one. That one is at your own risk. Do not blame me for anything that happens. Anyway, thank you for watching today, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.